I'm Dr. Caitlin. Thank you. Welcome to the 2025 Elena Diane Curris Lecture on Global Issues. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Caitlin Borak, Director of the Global Studies Institute, and I'm honored to welcome you to this very special event. This annual lecture is part of the Global Studies Institute's mission to foster critical reflection on global challenges and to build bridges between the university and the wider world. It's also a space for our students, faculty, and community to engage with leading voices in diplomacy, humanitarianism, and international affairs. I would like to extend a heartfelt welcome to Elena's family, the Curris family, Dino and Joe, Elena's parents, and Bobby, her sister-in-law. We're deeply grateful for your vision and generosity in making this event possible, and it's an honor to share this evening with you. We are proud to carry forward Elena's memory and values through this lecture series. So thank you very much for being here. Since August, we in the Global Studies Institute had planned for this lecture to focus on the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID. However, the recent dismantling of the agency disrupted not only our plans for the lecture, but the entire fields of international development and humanitarian aid. And in light of these unexpected changes, I'm especially grateful to the Curris family and to President Connolly for their continued support in moving forward with looking at the important work of USAID. And the spirit of global engagement that the agency represents. And tonight we're privileged to welcome a truly remarkable speaker, Monica Stein-Olson, whose distinguished career with the agency exemplifies the power of public service on the global stage. But before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank the many, many people who helped to make tonight possible. First, the Alumni Center staff for hosting us, the catering team for keeping us well fed, of course. Our wonderful department administrative support assistant, Naomi Rangel, without whom none of this would have happened. Dr. Ezgi Yildiz, the assistant director of the Global Studies Institute. Justin Stevens-Hart, our grad assistant. And the College of Liberal Arts Dean's Office, especially Jonathan Miklas and Lynn Bowman for helping us. And for Spencer Addy, who has been photographing the event, and 22 West Media, who is also here filming the event. I'd also like to recognize and welcome our colleagues from Leadership Long Beach, a community close to Elena's heart. And a warm welcome to all of our students, faculty, staff, and community partners for joining us tonight. And now, please join me in welcoming our campus president, Dr. Jane Close Connolly, who will introduce the Curris family.
That's what I'm doing.
Thank you, Caitlin. I really appreciate all the work that you've poured into making tonight a reality. And it's a great pleasure to be with all of you, for sure. You know, I have the most profound appreciation to Elena's family for their generosity and their visionary support, their generous and visionary support of the lecture series, and for traveling thousands of miles year after year to participate with all of us. And we are joined with Elena's parents, Dino and Joe, and Elena's sister-in-law, Bobby. And I think others are watching on YouTube, and maybe other members of the family are with us, as a matter of fact. As you know, Elena was a longtime valued member of the beach community and worked specifically in the University Relations and Development team. But she was also a citizen of the world. Her many friends, both on campus and the larger community, gravitated to her for many reasons, not the least of which was her amazingly adventurous spirit and boundless curiosity about the world. Her empathy and global interest animated her work at the beach and led her to take on leadership roles for such initiatives as the campus-wide Veterans Day celebration and the President's Forum on International Human Rights. What could be more important? So I think it's fitting that we honor Elena's memory by coming together to acknowledge that USAID's work and humanitarian and more broadly is an expression of our democratic values and generosity as a people. And it has also played a crucial role in protecting our country's strategic interests. Here at Long Beach, like so many people before her, Elena found a city and a university that were an ideal match for someone with a passion for global learning and literacy. I'm proud to say that our university is committed to graduating students with the knowledge and cultural competencies needed to take on global leadership service roles, which I hope will reappear. Yeah. Over the past decade, there's been a steady increase in the number of departments with global learning outcomes here at the beach, not just for an individual student studying abroad or even an individual class, but the learning outcomes of the major itself. Every point of global engagement that Elena Curris lecture is a great example. Helps us meet our ambitious global learning objectives and advances our efforts to foster enthusiasm for, understanding of, and sensitivity to global issues. Joe, Dino, Bobby, we're so proud to be working with you to honor Elena's memory by empowering people to act thoughtfully and creatively on issues of global significance. Thank you for entrusting us with this important responsibility. So on behalf of Cal State Long Beach and the greater Long Beach community, I also want to thank our distinguished guest speaker, Monica Stein-Olson, for her extraordinary service to our country and for sharing her expertise, insights, and perspectives. And thanks so much again to all of you for being here. Now I'd like to ask Bobby Curris to come up and say a few words.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome. I will welcome you as well to the Elena Diane Curris Global Issues Lecture Series. My name is Bobby Curris, Elena's sister-in-law, though as you have all heard me say before, I always felt that she was more my sister than a sister-in-law. Thank you for coming out tonight. We, the family, appreciate each and every one of you taking time out of your busy schedules. Thank you to President Conley and Caitlin Forat, the entire crew that helped make this evening possible. We see your work and we very much appreciate it. Tonight marks the 8th in this lecture series, but December will mark the 10th anniversary of Elena's passing. In considering what I wanted to say tonight, I began to think about all that has happened in the past 10 years. And then I began to wonder, what would Elena think about what has happened in the past 10 years? I know there are several people here tonight that knew Elena, but many of you did not have the opportunity to meet her. So an idea struck me. It might be informative to share with you my thoughts on her thoughts. Okay? Now, before we go down memory lane, I feel I need to set the stage with a story. Elena loved Long Beach. She bought her first home here after living in both Aspen and New York City. She loved the CSULB and her work here. She loved the people she worked with. Colleen, for one. She loved her neighborhood and neighbor Joe, who could not be here tonight. She was a Leadership Long Beach alum, where she met Sabrina. The three ladies here tonight who continue to support us in keeping Elena close. But when it came to collegiate sports, especially football, her heart resided in Alabama, where she did her undergraduate work. What you need to understand about the Curris family is that we are all a bit fanatical when it comes to football, specifically SEC football. Joan Dino went to Kentucky, her brother and I went to Arkansas, so Saturdays in the fall were an event. There was a lot of smack talking, a lot of bet making, a lot of fun. When Elena was at Alabama, and for years afterwards, they were a powerhouse. If you played the Tide, you were going to lose. End of the story. Elena relished this fact. Who wouldn't, right? Fall of 2015. Arkansas, go Hogs, and Alabama were to play. I honestly can't remember whose idea it was to make this bet. If it were Elena or her brother Bob, but bet they did, the two of them, the rest of us knew better. The loser would have to wear a t-shirt of the winner's design the next time the two teams met. Game day comes, shocking to no one, Alabama won. I'm sure decidedly. We all wondered, what would Elena make her brother wear? Sequins, feathers, rhinestones, hot pink, who knew? The next time the family got together at Thanksgiving, Elena brought out the t-shirt. Alabama red, crisp white lettering, all caps, it read, forget my French, some bitch, I love me some Alabama. Bob still has that t-shirt 10 years later. And no, he does not wear it when Arkansas and Alabama play. He will, however, wear it at least once a season when we watch an Alabama game. But what does this have to do with my 10-year retrospective? In the last 10 years, Alabama has declined. They are no longer the powerhouse they were when Elena was there. They are no longer the powerhouse they were for several years after. Elena would be very displeased with this turn of events. In the last 10 years, the condo Elena bought in Long Beach has apparently skyrocketed in value. There's even a Ruth's Chris around the corner now. She would definitely be happy about that. In the last 10 years, Leadership Long Beach has continued to grow in a direction Elena would have been proud to see. We had lunch with the director, Sean Devereaux, yesterday, and he shared a bit about the amazing opportunities for LLB in the near future, and I have no doubt Elena would champion them all. In the last 10 years, we saw COVID. Nobody was pleased with that. Elena loved getting dressed up and going out for dinner and drinks. She loved to shop, and she was good at it. Home Goods, TJ Maxx, always favorites. Having to be holed up in her condo under the lockdowns would have been devastating. In the last 10 years, she would have seen her parents, Joe and Dino, and brother Bob worked tirelessly on a museum in honor of Bob and Pauline Hearn, her maternal grandparents. The History of Benham Museum in Eastern Kentucky is set to open soon. It has been a family project, and I know that Elena would have been in the middle of it and would have very much enjoyed helping with the design. She had an amazing eye and knew presentation matters. To have had her in this project would have been invaluable. In the last 10 years, she would have seen her brother, my husband, Colonel Robert Curris, retire from the Army. She was always very proud of him and his service. And during her time at CSULB was very involved in the veterans programs, organizing Veterans Days events and working closely with the programs on campus. But like the rest of us, she worried. So I know to see him retire would have given her some peace. In the last 10 years, she would have seen all the growth and wonderful changes on this campus. This beautiful building, not far from Elena's office, one of them, and I hear a new student union is being built. Obviously, a lot more has happened in the last 10 years than just the things I mentioned. I could stand up here for a long time and talk about Elena, but you did not come here to listen to me. You came here to listen to Monica Stein-Olson. We had the privilege of having lunch with her earlier today, and I think that we will all find what she has to say interesting, to say the least. And it's a small world category. Elena's brother Bob had the opportunity to work with USAID on a few occasions, probably with some of the same people as Ms. Stein-Olson, and is very sorry he cannot be here. Hopefully in our short time together, I've given you a sense of who Elena was and her place in this world. It does us all good to reflect and remember, and events like these year after year help us as a family do just that. I will close tonight by doing what I always do when given the opportunity to speak on campus. I'm going to give you an assignment. I want you to think about the last 10 years. I want you to think about the people you've lost or the people you've found. What are the major and minor events over the last 10 years that have impacted you the most? What memories bring you joy? Give it some thought. We'll check in next year. Thank you for your time and attention. Go Beach. But more importantly, just for tonight, roll Tide.
Hi everyone. Hi. About dialogue, cross-cultural communication, ethical decision-making. It's an educational mission that also fosters empathy, compassion. But if we are truly to understand the world around us and to advocate for change, our educational mission must also examine our place in global issues, our place in global dialogue. So I am thrilled to be here to introduce our esteemed guest speaker, who will guide us through a discussion of her vital work amidst significant complexity. Monica Stein-Olson is a retired Foreign Service officer with the United States Agency for International Development. I used to call that USAID, and Monica was just telling me that at a certain point it became USAID. So we can interchange them for those that were used to it one way. Chair and Africa expert at the National War College, she led student delegations, primarily veterans, to Southern and East Africa to meet with ambassadors, country teams, and heads of state. You're probably already impressed enough, but I'm going to add something else. She recently completed a 2-year novel writing program at Stanford, and she's finishing her memoir titled The Diplomatic Diaries. And I know we're all in this room going to want an advanced copy of that, and in which she reflects on her years as a USAID public servant. So it's my honor on behalf of the College of Liberal Arts, and with the deepest gratitude to the Curris family for making space for this conversation and Elena's memory, to please join me in welcoming Monica Stein-Olson.
It's an honor to be here today, to be part of the Curris Family Lecture Series, sharing a story that's deeply personal to me. This is not just a reflection of my own journey, but a tribute to the men and women who served in some of the most dangerous and challenging environments around the world. These are the quiet warriors of USAID, whose stories often go unsaid, but whose sacrifices are immense. This is also a tribute to recently fired USAID employees, including our Foreign Service nationals who've been disrespected or betrayed by this dismantling of USAID by the Trump administration. I stand with you. You served America, and for that you have my deepest respect. Thank you for your public service. So, this is my final love letter to USAID, which I wrote on March 28th, 2025. Dear USAID, today, of all days, you cease to exist. Out of 14,000 employees, only 15 remain. And today, of all days, a 7.7 magnitude earthquake struck Myanmar, reverberating across Southeast Asia and causing widespread devastation, including the collapse of a high-rise building in Bangkok. For decades, you were always first on the ground, coordinating with donors, deploying seasoned teams, and delivering life-saving aid stamped from the American people. Your senior response team, based in Bangkok, knew this region intimately. You sent 3 aid workers to assess what you could provide to Myanmar, and today, on this very day, the earthquake, you were fired, either in country or en route. A cruel decision made by the Trump administration and carried out by Elon Musk's Doge dismantled your ability to act. It terminated the contracts that would have deployed the world's top search and rescue teams from LA County and Fairfax, Virginia. You are kneecapped. You are hogtied. You no longer have the capacity to respond. You cannot no longer save lives. Just 9 weeks ago, on January 20th, you were America's fastest and most effective civilian response to a humanitarian crisis anywhere in the world. You provided billions in humanitarian aid annually, responding to earthquakes, tsunamis, and refugee crises. A few recent examples. In Ukraine, you provided over $2 billion in aid, including food, shelter, and medical care, feeding 3.5 million Ukrainians. Mr. Trump, who will feed these people now? You provided over $1 billion in humanitarian assistance to Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank, where both my son and I worked, addressing urgent needs like food insecurity, healthcare, shelter, water, sanitation, and psychosocial support. You were the largest donor in Afghanistan, contributing $3 billion in humanitarian and development assistance since the Taliban's retreat in 2021. You supported over 100 million displaced people globally, including Syrian refugees. During the 2010 Haiti earthquake, I was there with you, managing relief efforts alongside our military, providing food, shelter, and medical aid to millions. You contained the Ebola outbreak in Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone, saving countless lives. In just 9 weeks, you went from being the world's greatest humanitarian agency to nothing. Today in Myanmar, the world witnessed this cost. I'm writing this letter because I'm angry, I'm devastated, I'm enraged, I'm outraged. For 30 years, you were my life. I served you proudly. President John F. Kennedy knew what he was doing when he created you in November 1961 as an independent agency guided by the White House and the State Department. Your mission was ambitious: to advance U.S. soft power through socioeconomic development, to lift the masses of newly independent states, nations, to foster viable democracies, and to strengthen economic ties, all while keeping communism at bay. And you did it. For over 60 years, you have stood as a pillar of global development and diplomacy. I was 4 years old when you were created, the daughter of a former POW in Nazi Germany and a 3-war veteran, a true Cold Warrior. My path to public service was set early. It was a calling, and you gave me purpose. I followed you to 8 countries as you advanced our national security and made us safer at home. When I was 28, I worked as an accountant in Silicon Valley, and I hated my job. I had no purpose. But when I watched the movie Gorillas in the Mist, I decided I would live and work in Africa, where over 75% of the world's poor lived, and I dreamed of making a difference with my life. I quit my job, moved to DC, and waitressed to support myself. I applied, I interviewed, I reapplied, I re-interviewed, I reapplied again. I was determined to claw my way into your agency. After 2 years, in 1989, I finally joined you as a Foreign Service officer, starting as an entry-level accountant. I had to start somewhere. My first posting was Mali, one of the poorest countries in the world. Before I deployed, I watched Hollywood films like Out of Africa and The African Queen, imagining romantic safaris and love affairs. But when I stepped off the plane in Bamako, I was struck by the staggering reality. Fewer than half the population had access to clean water, and the under 5 mortality rate was 23%. Literacy, life expectancy, infrastructure, everything lacked. The country depended heavily on foreign aid for basic services. We implemented a traditional development program, basic education, and primary health care. Aid from the American people. And then bam, 1991, my first coup. I witnessed it all. Student protests, labor strikes, brutal crackdowns. More than 300 peaceful demonstrators were killed in the streets of Bamako that March. The chaos was overwhelming and grief hung heavy in the air. Mali was under a one-party military dictatorship that had ruled since 1968. Civil society barely had room to breathe. Corruption, repression, and inefficiency were part of the daily life. Like many African nations, Mali was burdened by the World Bank and IMF structural adjustment programs, policies that slashed public spending on health, education, and food subsidies. The poorest were asked to survive with even less. But something extraordinary happened. The military turned on the dictator, Moussa Traoré, and sided with the people. They promised a transition to democracy, and they kept their word. The work we did. Voter education, training election monitors, strengthening civil society. It felt urgent. It felt real. By the time I left in 1992, Mali had a new democratic constitution and its first freely elected president, Alpha Umar Konate. What a moment. I still get chills remembering the joy in the streets, the pride, the music, the celebrations. The US began pointing to Mali as a model for democratic transition in West Africa. I felt I made a difference because I worked for you. This is a love letter to the Malian people, their resilience, their joy, and their unshakable belief that something better was possible, democracy. USAID, you played a major role. This is also a love letter to Hollywood. I met my future husband, a geologist from Minnesota in Mali. We camped in the countryside and danced under the stars to the beat of African drums. Mali changed me. Steve and I have been married 32 years now. My next step was Burundi. We arrived in 1993. We were newly married and full of hope, unaware we were stepping in the eye of a coming storm, an ethnic tinderbox. Burundi and its neighbor, Rwanda, were the most densely populated countries in Africa. Ethnic violence had plagued both nations for decades, rooted in the legacy of European colonization. The Tutsis had been favored by the Belgians and given privileged access to education, jobs, and positions of influence. The Hutu majority had been exploited as laborers and denied opportunities. Burundi had endured genocides in 1972 and 1988. The USAID staff had been mainly educated elite Tutsis. But when Melchior Ndadaye, a Hutu, was elected president in 1993, USAID had provided assistance for Burundi's first democratic presidential election. It was seen as a miracle. Hope rippled across the hills. This was the first democratic transfer of power since independence. Steve and I camped in the countryside on weekends and felt removed from the past, invincible against the violence. We visited the Yungwe forest in Rwanda, where we hiked among ancient mahogany trees and watched colobus monkeys swinging through the canopies like flying skunks. On our way back, we would stop at the Le Cercle Nautique, and we ate grilled tilapia at a restaurant built on stilts of Lake Tanganyika. Hippos flicked dung in the shallows. Tourists leaned over the restaurant railing, angling for shots of the snorting, ear-wagging beasts. Hippos tiptoed onto land and twirled their tails, spreading their feces to impress the female hippos with their manly scent. It must have worked because I became pregnant. Our baby, its existence felt like a small, private miracle, carried in my womb as the country held its breath. At our mission, I confided to a Belgian colleague that I was pregnant. Corinne wept with joy. This is the start of something new. She had 3 girls. And then came another coup. Steve was in London, and I woke to gunfire. Bursts cracked through the hills. The windows rattled. That October morning, I climbed into our Land Cruiser. I hadn't slept since the first gunshots. The driver took me to the mission to check on our building and satellite radio. Soldiers waved us through the checkpoints, but the mood was tense. At one intersection, a group of men pounded on the hood. Retourne, vite, vite, they shouted. Turn around now, go back fast. My heart slammed against my ribs. I glanced down at my belly, the baby. the world we were bringing him into, I bolted the doors and I closed the curtains. I began to bleed. I stayed in bed in the dark, and in an agonizing week without telephones and airlines, I was finally evacuated to Washington, D.C. The baby was okay, but the months that followed were a blur of grief and dread. Burundi's President Ndadaye had been captured and executed by the Tutsi-dominated army. His bullet-ridden body was dumped in a field. Retaliatory violence exploded. Thousands were slaughtered. The coup failed, but plunged Burundi into 10 years of civil war between the minority Tutsis and the majority Hutus. A year that began with democratic hope in Burundi ended in devastating conflict where up to 300,000 people were killed. The civil war exacerbated poverty, displaced large numbers of people, and disrupted development programs. Our program shifted to humanitarian aid and peace building. Thank you, USAID. Our first son, Hans, was born on March 11, 1994. I was home in DC, and 3 weeks later, I read the ticker on the bottom of the CNN broadcast. A plane from Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, was shot down by a surface-to-air missile rocket over the Rwandan capital, Kigali, killing the Rwandan and Burundian presidents, both Hutus, launching the Rwanda genocide. Later that same night, in Kigali, Hutu extremists assassinated the Rwandan prime minister, a moderate Hutu, and her 10 Belgian soldiers assigned from the UN peacekeeping forces to guard her, triggering the departure of the Belgians and UN forces, emboldening the Interahamwe, which were the Hutu extremists, to carry out their predetermined plans for the Hutu population to kill the entire Tutsi population. Genocide. The UN was redeployed to evacuate expatriates such as the American employees in Rwanda and Burundi missions on April 9th and 10th. Jane Goodall's chimps were evacuated to Kenya. But not one Rwandan or Burundian US government employee was evacuated with the Americans. Hutu extremists set up roadblocks, and local groups went house to house with machetes, knowing where Tutsis lived because the extremists had identified the places with red paint. The extremists propped up the media, a radio station and newspapers that circulated hate propaganda, urging people to weed out the cockroaches. Radio announcers broadcasted the names of prominent people to be killed, including some of my FSNs, Foreign Service National, local staff. Neighbors killed neighbors, and some Hutu husbands even killed their Tutsi wives, saying their refusal to do would have resulted in their own deaths. Thousands of Tutsi women were raped and kept as sexual slaves. Tutsis had sought refuge at local churches and sports stadiums, often at the invitation of local authorities, coaches, priests, and nuns. At least 5,000 Tutsis were crammed in a stadium like sardines in Kubuye, where gunmen perched in the bleachers, raising bullets and tossing grenades, making victims scatter like cockroaches, before Hutu extremists hacked them to death with rusty machetes. We had television. We saw the news, the grainy footage, the mass graves. Mid-June, news of the Rwandan genocide was overtaken by the murder of Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman. While the nation was riveted by the police chase of O.J. Simpson's white Bronco down the Los Angeles freeway, on that one day, 10,000 Tutsis were hacked to death, and 2,500 women and girls were raped. And yet somehow I too was guilty of switching the channel. I focused on keeping the baby safe. I focused on sleep and milk and putting one foot in front of the other. I told myself I was powerless, that we couldn't have stopped it, that it wasn't my war. Over the course of 100 days, at least 800,000 Tutsis and moderate Hutus were slaughtered. But the United States could have stopped the genocide, or at least tried. 4 years later, President Clinton stood on the tarmac in Kigali, Rwanda, and said the world had failed, that the United States hadn't known the extent of the killings. Not true. You and I both know that. In the fall, 1994, our family relocated to Kenya. Both of the Rwanda and Burundi missions were merged into the Coordinating Office for Burundi and Rwanda Affairs, the COBRA office. I was the COBRA controller. Based in Nairobi, I flew weekly either to Bujumbura or Kigali with Hans and our nanny to help program millions of dollars in emergency humanitarian aid, including food aid and programs in health, nutrition, small-scale agriculture for refugees and the internally displaced. USAID ramped up support for reconstruction, reconciliation, and recovery efforts, including programs for displaced people, rebuilding institutions, and restoring health services. The first time we flew to Rwanda was fall of 1994, right after the genocide. During the rainy season, when the clouds were enormous and low and lightning flashed through the violet blue nights, I had requested to stay at the Hotel de Mille Collines, where Paul Rusesabagina, a Hutu married to a Tutsi, had hidden 1,200 Tutsis who had sought shelter in the hotel he managed. His story was unknown until the Hollywood movie Hotel Rwanda. When Hans and I arrived in Kigali, the new government had restored most essential services and buried most of the dead. But the massacre by machete was evident by the hundreds that walked around with the bandaged limbs and deforming scars. They were the lucky ones, the zombie-like survivors. 75% of the Tutsi population had been murdered. Hutus had murdered 45 members of the US government staff that we left behind. 45. The remaining staff were shell-shocked, revealing personal horror stories. Neighbors hacking neighbors to death, and colleagues hacking colleagues to death. Priests killed their parishioners, and elementary school teachers killed their students. Bonaventure Imbizi had worked for USAID for 10 years. He and his family were left behind because they were Rwandans, they were African, they were black. Bona, as we called him in the mission, his wife and 3 children, who were 3, 2, and 3 months, escaped the genocide due to a neighbor's kindness. He later told me that he told his wife, "We have no option, let us drive to the church. At least we'll force them to shoot us instead of killing us by machetes." A machete had severed his mother's Achilles tendon so she couldn't run, and she was hacked to death. I carried Hans in a front pack as we walked through the town center along the Boulevard de la Révolution, lined with banana trees, past the American Embassy and crumbling adobe houses, shocked at the number of amputees meandering around Kigali. We walked down the red dirt roads, past blue metal doors, and through the dried bush strewn with the debris between high reed fences surrounding modest houses. The Soros Insurance building's plate glass atrium was spiderweb of bullet holes, and other buildings were pockmarked with grenade blasts. Your building, the USAID building, sported a shot-up facade. Without embassy approval, I paid a local driver to take me an hour south of Kigali to Ntarama's former Catholic church, where the 5,000 people had been murdered. Hundreds of skeletons were intertwined with pieces of batik patched over them. Lonely skulls in the field and a lower jaw attached to a neck, spine, and partial rib cage. My heart burst when I saw a tiny baby's jaw and pelvis with a baby's sandal stuck in it. On another trip to Bujumbura, Hans accompanied me and slept in a bassinet on Saturday mornings while I clucked with Corinne, my friend from the mission. She cradled Hans. "Il est très beau, mais tu dois avoir une fille." You need to have a baby girl. We laughed together. Back in Nairobi, Steve and I celebrated Hans's first birthday. That night, we listened to the BBC Africa News in English, reporting that Belgian citizens were murdered in Burundi. The next morning, I picked up the International Herald Tribune. The victim's car had its tires slashed by a booby trap. The family tried to flee, but were caught and shot despite pleading with the gunman. The woman was shot in the face and the girl in the throat. This love letter is for my friend Corinne and her daughter Yasmin, both Burundian-born Belgians murdered 7 miles from the capital of their home. This love letter is for the 1 million Tutsis murdered in the genocide. This love letter is for the 45 Rwandans that the US government left behind. This love letter is for Bona Nyingizi, who reopened at the USAID mission and then went on to become Minister of Commerce in Paul Kagame's ragtag government. 30 years later, Paul Kagame is still the dictator, and Bona is still part of his government. Our small family arrived in Tanzania in the summer of 1995, and I was expecting another baby. I kept quiet about my pregnancy until I arrived at Post. I didn't want to risk my assignment as the controller. Tanzania was brimming with change. After decades of a multi-party rule, after decades of a one-party rule under Nyerere, the country was cautiously stepping into the world of multi-party democracy. It was a time of incredible promise, but also uncertainty. And USAID as ever, was right in the thick of it, supporting the country's very first multi-party elections, strengthening civil society, and helping to lay the foundation for democratic institutions. I still remember the buzz in the air around the October 1995 election when Benjamin Mkapa was elected the president. It wasn't perfect, but it was a beginning, a hopeful one. Economically, things were even tougher. Tanzanians were struggling with liberalization, privatization, and the structural adjustment programs, all while carrying the weight of rural poverty and underdevelopment. But again, USAID, you stepped in, not just pushing policies, but backing the right people behind them. Whether it was supporting private enterprise or helping manage debt, the work you did mattered deeply, and I was right by your side. And then there was the health sector. It stretched painfully thin in the face of the HIV/AIDS crisis. At the time, the HIV prevalence rate among Tanzanians aged 15 to 39 was approximately 3.4%. The USAID program targeted the Kagera region on Lake Victoria, which reported an HIV prevalence rate of 24.2% among young adults. This love letter is for all the people you saved with the healthcare programs you put in more than 80 countries, including PEPFAR, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, saving over 25 million lives through testing, treatment, and prevention. Child and maternal health helped reduce child deaths by over 50% in many countries, supported immunization programs that vaccinate millions annually. Family planning helped over 300 million couples access voluntary family planning services. Over 500 million bed nets, were distributed via the President's Malaria Initiative. 3.6 million children under 5 treated for malnutrition in 2022 alone. Eradication and control of disease, you played a lead role in the eradication of smallpox and near eradication of polio. I'm enraged, President Trump, because cutting this sector will accelerate disease outbreaks, reverse decades of HIV/AIDS progress, and weaken pandemic defenses globally. As a country, our national security has been weakened. Our second baby boy, Hunter, was born in Pretoria on February 10, 1996. As he grew older, he told his friends that he was African American. It was true. Africa was home to him and us in every way that counted. 3 years later, on August 7, 1998, I was in Dar es Salaam. I'd driven our beat-up Land Cruiser, me and my 6-week baby bump, to the American Embassy on Lebanon Road in Dar es Salaam. The sky was that blinding Tanzanian blue, and the heat hung thick in the air. I parked across from the embassy, right in front of our friend's house. Their fuchsia-lined gardens buzzed with sunbirds. I still remember rubbing one of the soft triangle-shaped petals between my fingers and breathing in the scent. I was very excited about being pregnant again. Our friends were away vacationing, so there was no Friday play date for my sons. Hans was now 4 and Hunter was 2 that morning. I was very disappointed. I chatted briefly with the young Tanzanian woman guarding the entrance to the embassy. She'd been taking secretarial courses at night, hoping to qualify for a job with USAID. I could tell she wanted to talk more about it. I wish I'd stayed, but I was always in a hurry. I noted the long line of Africans waiting in line to apply for a visa to the United States. After my OB checkup with Dr. Silva, by then a really dear friend, I picked up our mail, cashed a check, gassed up the car. I was heading to the USAID office, my heart full of dreams about hoping for a baby girl. At 10:39 a.m., everything shattered. A thunderous explosion tore through the air, the embassy gone, a bomb, a fireball. Dozens of Tanzanians vaporized in seconds. I'll never forget that sound, the force of it, nor the silence that followed. The young female guard, gone, just like that. Almost simultaneously, a second bomb exploded at the US Embassy in Nairobi, Al-Qaeda. We didn't know that name yet, but we would soon. Over 900 FBI agents had fled into East Africa to gather evidence, identify victims, and track perpetrators. In Dar, the target was for Americans, but not yet none of us died that day. Only Africans, the people who worked for us, the ones who waited under the hot sun dreaming of a visa to the United States. I was given an award for heroism. I still don't know what for. My friends were dead, hundreds were injured, blinded, burned, broken. I couldn't sleep, couldn't stop imagining the worst. Normally, my two little boys would have been across the street that day and in the house that received the worst of the fireball. My nightmares were of my kids. Little arms reaching out from flames like pieces of fried bacon. I self-diagnosed with PTSD, but never sought treatment. I was afraid it would affect my security clearance, my career, my life. It was right to be afraid. I was acting director in Tanzania for 3 months after the bombing with one task: program $10 million for the victims. I was functioning, smiling inside I was hollow, except I wasn't. I was pregnant. 7 months later, our baby girl, Tatiana, was born on March 20th, 1999 in Pretoria. She was healthy, thank God. I remember whispering to my friend Corinne in a moment of joy, "J'ai un petit fille maintenant," I have a little girl. This love letter is for the victims of the Al-Qaeda twin bombings. 224 people died in the blasts, including 12 Americans, which include a father and son team, and more than 4,500 people were wounded. This love letter is for Dr. De Silva, who cared for the wounded and who had died too young, too soon. This love letter is for all the victims of terrorism, and most of all, this love letter is for my two little boys who remain safe. Our family had spent almost a decade in sub-Saharan Africa, and despite the danger, we found much to love. But with 3 small children under the age of 5, we decided that it was finally time to leave the continent after 2 coups, a civil war, genocide, and terrorist bombing. But Africa was a place where USAID taught me what it means to serve with purpose. In 2000, we moved to Moscow. That year, a snow-blanketed Red Square and Vladimir Putin rose to power following Yeltsin's resignation. I stepped into a new role finally as deputy director, no more accounting. The Berlin Wall had long since crumbled, the Soviet Union dissolved, but Russia's transformation was still raw. And wounds of collapse lingered in its economy, its politics as well. I had moved from traditional development programs in Africa to supporting a transitional economy, helping Russia prepare for the rigors of a free open market society. Your presence, USAID in Russia, for 20 years was a bold investment in the belief that democracy, civil society, and economic freedom could take root in the aftermath of the Soviet collapse. We stood with reformers, nurtured grassroots movements, supported independent media, and helped build the institutions that underpin any free society. You were important for our, USAID, you were important for our national security. You championed economic reform, stabilizing banks, encouraging privatization, nurturing entrepreneurship. You believed in the grassroots power and citizen voices, in the integrity of elections, and the independence of courts. You dared to dream of a vibrant, self-sustaining civil society. In those fragile years of modest recovery for Russia, buoyed by rising oil prices, you stood firm, unyielding in mission, unwavering in your belief that democratic governance, civil society, and the rule of law could take root in the soil of post-Soviet state. You supported fragile NGOs, bolstered human rights efforts, and stood beside reformers trying to pull Russia out of the shadows of authoritarianism into the light of possibility. Then on September 11th, 2001, I watched the second tower fall on a small television set in my embassy office. The world changed, and so did you. Oh. Still, I remember the flowers outside the US Embassy in Moscow. The outpouring of love from ordinary Russians was unexpected, quiet, and beautiful. That too was your legacy. You became my witness, my companion in the dark. We would not let them win. Together, we met with Open Russia, the brainchild of Mikhail Khodorkovsky, the oligarch with audacious dreams of civil reform and perhaps even the presidency. He boldly signed a $6 million grant agreement with USAID to promote civil society, a counterweight to rising autocracy. I remember that room, I remember the promise. The following week, after the signing, Khodorkovsky was arrested and later sent to a Siberian gulag for 10 years for the dream of a robust civil society in Russia. Our other main private sector ally, Andrei Kozlov, deputy chair of the central bank, courageously fought money laundering and corruption supported by USAID programs. For that, he was assassinated. He gave his life for his beliefs, and so did investigative journalist Anna Politkovskaya. This love letter is for every civil society warrior who stood with us and for those who died trying. We witnessed the quiet suffocation of hope, the growing control, the silencing of dissent, the shuttering of voices we had worked so hard to amplify. Pro-democracy NGOs were dismantled. Our election monitoring partner, Golos, who courageously exposed electoral fraud in Russia, helped spark massive street demonstrations against Kremlin power. For that, the Peace Corps was expelled, accused of espionage. And finally, you, USAID, you were shut down for meddling in Russian politics. After 4 snowy, soul-searching years in Russia, I was posted to Morocco, North Africa. Oh, this is the American Embassy in Moscow with the flowers. And I had the incredible, humbling honor of becoming the first woman in 50 years to lead that mission. And no, I was not a DEI hire. It was 2004, Morocco stood at a crossroads, looking ahead, modernizing, yet still wrestling with deep-rooted challenges. King Mohammed VI was ushering in sweeping reforms, economic liberalization, and the groundbreaking family code, or Mudawana, which gave Moroccan women greater rights in marriage and family life. We arrived just 3 years after 9/11, and 6 years after the East Africa American Embassy bombings. The world was shifting beneath our feet, and so were you, USAID. Under President Bush, USAID's focus pivoted from global health and traditional programs to countering violent extremism, CVE. And so we graduated Morocco from the long-standing health programs that had shaped 3 decades of progress. But let me be clear, USAID had helped change lives in Morocco. USAID helped reduce maternal mortality rate by over 60% between 1990 and 2010. You dramatically increased contraceptive prevalence. You tackled infectious diseases. You eliminated polio. You strengthened immunization systems. And then, when the world demanded it, you pivoted with purpose. We redesigned every program to go after the roots of violent extremism, poverty, exclusion, lack of opportunity. We worked hand in glove with the Middle East Partnership Initiative, MEPI, led by Liz Cheney, and with AFRICOM's Trans-Sahara Counterterrorism Program, AFRICOM. They were our new partners in prevention AFRICOM was headquartered in Stuttgart and by 4-star general. Yeah. Together we became unlikely allies. Diplomats, development professionals, and defense officials, finding common ground to our shared mission to prevent extremism. We became the 3 pillars of national security. We are the 3 pillars of national security. We built programs that blended military hard power with USAID soft power. And for the first time in the agency's history, I wrote a mission strategy that focused solely on youth. Why youth? Because in the MENA region, this is the Middle East North Africa region, half the population is under the age of 24. Many of them live in poverty. They're shut out, they're disenfranchised, they're disillusioned by systems they believe are rigged against them. And as the 2003 Casablanca bombings made tragically clear, at-risk youth are vulnerable. At-risk youth are vulnerable to recruitment by extremist groups who offer status, belonging, and income, and new sneakers. But when young people have access to quality education, when they have job training, vocational skills, a path to employment, when they have hope, they are far less likely to be seduced by violence. So we invested in schools, in entrepreneurship, in opportunity, in dignity. One issue that kept me up at night, too many kids were being locked up for petty crimes. They were thrown into the general prison population where radical ideology could spread like wildfire. We knew we needed to interrupt the cycle, so we created a prevention-first approach, education, skills training, alternatives to incarceration, a second chance. AFRICOM provided the funding and the hardware, and that youth prison program became my parting legacy. And it worked. It was replicated across the region because when development is done right, it is one of the most powerful antidotes to extremism. And yes, it makes Americans safer at home. USAID is not just an aid agency. It's a vital part of our national security apparatus. This love letter is for our partners at AFRICOM who backed this prison program. But more than anything, love letter is for the young people of Morocco and across the region who carry the future on their shoulders. When my family moved to Washington, D.C. after 5 years in Morocco, so our oldest son could start high school, my path at USAID shifted. I was assigned to teach at the National War College. There, I found a new calling, teaching the military about the vital intersection of diplomacy, development, and defense. As I've mentioned, the 3 pillars of national security. I became the USAID Chair and Africa Expert, but that title didn't matter as much as the students I was teaching. Many of them had served in Iraq and Afghanistan, and many carried the invisible wounds from their time in combat. They weren't just soldiers. They were people who'd witnessed the hardest parts of war, and they were seeking answers on how to avoid repeating the same mistakes. I taught 3 courses. 1, non-military instruments of power, where we explored how diplomacy and development can shape global stability. Another was the global context, where we dissected complex foreign policy situations in countries like Rwanda, Sudan, and Afghanistan. And these were not just theoretical exercises. We dug deep into the real world impact of our work. We visited places like Rwanda, where we met President Paul Kagame, who spoke passionately about his country's economic success. But when we asked him about his human rights, he laughed, and that was a sobering moment. It underscored the complexities we face when trying to promote democracy in regions where power has come at a cost. It's one thing to teach theory, it's another to live the lessons. I'll never forget a moment when one of my students, a Navy SEAL, missed class. When I asked him where he'd been, he just smiled and said overseas. That weekend, President Obama had ordered the operation that took down bin Laden. That's who we teach. That's who we serve beside. These are the people on the front lines of our national security, often without the recognition they deserve. This love letter is for all of my students, past and present, and for one of my favorite students, Chris Stevens, who went to Libya as ambassador and was tragically killed in Benghazi on September 11, 2012. 3 others were killed with him, Sean Smith, an FSO, and 2 former Navy SEALs, Tyrone Woods and Glenn Doherty. After two years teaching, I was assigned as the Deputy Administrator for the Management Bureau, responsible for overseeing the USAID's overseas operations. I saw firsthand how our officers were affected by the stress and strain of working in high-risk environments. We weren't just operating in conflict zones. We were in places like Darfur, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Sudan. Regions where violence was a daily reality and where our officers were serving under the same conditions as soldiers in combat, but without the armor or the recognition. Our officers, many of them were burned out and quietly breaking down and couldn't travel outside the wire to monitor or evaluate our programs. It was a pressure that was relentless and it took a toll on their mental health. When a USAID officer was killed in Afghanistan, and 6 months later his roommate died by suicide, we knew we had to do something to change. We commissioned a stress and resilience assessment, and the findings were clear. Nearly 76% of USAID staff had served in high-threat environments. They reported the same stressors faced by military: multiple deployments, long separations, burnout, role confusions, but unlike the military, USAID had not yet adapted to this new reality. One officer summed it up perfectly. The staffing model doesn't match the mission anymore. You had changed, USAID had changed. This isn't just about implementing mental health toolkits or resilience programs. It was about changing the USAID culture. I advocated for better mental health services, some of which were implemented, but most weren't. I was detailed to the State Department for a year, where I worked on Syria, and I set up a platform to cover cross-border aid to the Syrian opposition from eastern Turkey. I later managed the Libya portfolio for 2 years, working to stabilize the country after Gaddafi's fall. Our programs focused on democracy, just to strengthen our own national security. In Frankfurt, I was tasked to set up a regional hub to support programs in Lebanon and other high-threat areas. Everywhere I went, I saw the same pressures on our officers, people working in isolation, under immense stress, and without the recognition they deserved. Our world had become more dangerous, and we weren't prepared. Almost done. Dear USAID, you are my first great love, and after 3 decades together, you gave me the most unforgettable farewell. In 2016, I arrived in the West Bank and Gaza, ready to serve in what I believed would be the final chapter of our incredible 30-year romance. As your first female director to West Bank and Gaza, and again, I was not a DEI hire, I thought the stars had aligned. I thought that my former boss, Hillary Clinton, would be the first female president. I felt I would have the support needed to help build something lasting. Then came the plot twist. What started as a $400 million program aimed at building Palestinian institutions in support of a two-state solution ended for me in the heartbreak of closing out most of the mission, shutting down our office and closing doors on dreams. President Trump had been elected. It didn't happen overnight. It wasn't a single event. Not even the day he took office. No, it felt more like a whirlwind romance without the romance. First, Jared Kushner was handed Middle East peace. Then came David Friedman as ambassador and Jason Greenblatt as the Middle East envoy. The trio, as I came to call them, real estate men sent to reimagine the region's future, but without the Palestinians. They never said that out loud. I gave them everything. Briefings, field trips, introduction to our Palestinian partners. I even brought our Gazan partners to the West Bank for roundtable discussions. We had hope, I had hope, that if they saw what we saw, they'd understand, that they'd see how vital these programs were, that the lives and dignity of Palestinians mattered. For a brief moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, they were listening. But then came December 6, 2017, the Jerusalem Proclamation, the embassy move. President Abbas cut ties. The Prime Minister and ministers were barred from communicating with the US government, except through USAID. They trusted you. They trusted us. We held the line. I shuttled back and forth messages, tried to keep programs afloat. We fought to keep the mission alive, even as our FY17 funds were frozen and humanitarian aid was slashed. I'll never forget sitting across from Jared Kushner in Tel Aviv, making my final plea to save the 2 humanitarian programs in Gaza. 80% of the people depended on them, and I, ever loyal, believed I could convince him. I begged him. I believed compassion would win. But I was wrong when I was asked to close the mission. Still, I saved our staff, those brilliant, resilient, deeply committed local staff. We scattered the seeds of our mission across the region to DC, to other posts. They carried our values forward. Now what will happen to them? When Jared Kushner unveiled the Economic Peace Plan in Bahrain in 2019, it was built partly from our work at the mission. But the Palestinians boycotted it, the plan failed, Jason Greenblatt, the Middle East envoy, left, and then I left. I was so disgusted. By then, I felt that USAID and I were both fractured, schizophrenic, like 2 characters in a political drama written by Kafka. And yet through it all, I will always treasure the privilege of working with the remarkable staff and partners of the West Bank and Gaza mission. They changed my life. They reminded me why I fell in love with this work in the first place. And no, we never gave 50 million condoms to Hamas. Finally, this love letter is for you, USAID, for our 2,000 Foreign Service officers that were just let go, our 5,000 local staff, the backbone of our agency, and our contractors, NGOs, and donor networks, for our partners, recipients, and beneficiaries. And let's not forget the USAID Memorial Wall at the Ronald Reagan Building, currently covered, but which honors 99 of our colleagues who died in service to this mission. They gave everything, often quietly, without recognition they deserved. This dismantling was cruel and may erase your name, USAID, from headlines, but it will never erase what you've done. This letter is for all of you, the ones who have served with unwavering dedication, and for all the millions of lives you've touched. Dear USAID, thank you for the incredible family that I have and for the incredible circle of friends, and you know who you are. Shame on you, President Trump. You have blood on your hands, but you know that. I was so nervous. Oh, Joe, was it okay, Joe?
Thank you for the courage
Yes.
of speaking up in this
Oh.
very difficult time. Thank you.
You know I have nothing to lose. Except my last name's not the same as my husband's, so I might get deported. Okay, come on, I need the questions. What, can you tell me your name?
Yes, hi, my name is Samuel King. I'm a master's degree student in studying geography. Thank you so much for your talk. It was very inspiring to myself. Just a little background, I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Zambia, Africa.
Oh, so okay, good.
Yeah, and I just came back last year.
Oh,
Yeah, so kind of fresh off the plane, I guess.
lucky you that you're, yeah.
Yes, and I'm part of this scholarship program here, and I intend on researching the dismantling of USAID. And I was wondering if I may ask you,
Yeah.
or kind of a research suggestion. I want to study the difference between the rural and urban sectors in development.
Okay,
So, was USAID more focused on urban or rural development?
it depended on the country, and I was telling somebody today in the classroom, each country has the different programs. So, Moscow, that could have been civil society development, political party building. In Africa, a lot of it was rural. So it depends on the country.
Okay.
Okay, originally there used to be sort of a cookie cutter approach, but then it didn't work. And I think the tragedy of dismantling USAID, we had learned so much over the last 60 years, so much, and we finally, it's gone. It's gone.
Do you think that enough time has gone by to study this in a research capacity
Enough time?
since the dismantling of USAID?
Sure. Sure. Yeah, and then it may come back. I mean, it depends on, I know that they're folding some programs into the State Department in the 3 cones, and they're gonna build a 4th cone called humanitarians, which I hope many of you will apply to in 2 or 3 years. And then, so the question is for people that are thinking about foreign assistance, what it's gonna look like, because eventually Trump will be gone, I hope. And then either foreign aid will be built on that within the State Department, or it could be another USAID type agency. But USAID, it did need to be reformed. There's no doubt about that. But we need foreign aid, and it wasn't that much money. It was for every
0.01%?
yeah, 0.7%, but it was 1 penny out of every tax dollar. 1 penny. And what I was telling somebody today that it was targeted first. And I do know that there was an investigation into Elon Musk's Ukraine project. He was being funded, part of his Starlink program was being funded by USAID, and there were some irregularities. And what was really weird about the dismantling, all of the inspector generals were fired right away. You couldn't go to anybody about questions. And now the GCs were, and now the unions, it's cruel. Hi.
Hi, it's Kathy Boss. Is there any way that NGOs can work together during this period and try
Yes.
to maintain some of the programs?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, and I'm telling students today, I go, there's a lot of NGOs and foundations and corporations that have, philanthropy that are not US government funded. Or when I was in Rwanda, I had a friend that came out to stay with me, and he got hired, right? Figure out, you're never gonna get rich being a development officer. So go out and work for free, why not? Do what you have to do. It's a calling. It's definitely a calling. Hi, Bill, I know you already.
I'm quite certain that there are a lot of really good people in Washington and within the Republican Party who support foreign aid and who supported USAID over the years. Why does it seem like there's not any effort within the Republican Party to
Oh,
stop this?
Mario Rubio supported it. Lindsey Graham was a big supporter.
Where were they?
They come on. You know where
I'm
their
interested in your
kiss
thoughts on
was? What? Joe? No, they're afraid. They have no backbone. And you know what? If Marco Ruby was shocked when USAID was dismantled because he had named himself the administrator, but Trump would just remove him. Trump would remove him. He removes anybody that has, if there any, you all know this. You all know this, and people, I'm so proud of the Harvard University, and I'm hoping that more universities stand up. People have to stand up. Okay,
Hi, I'm Beza, and I wanted to ask, what other countries do you see taking on this level of aid work?
oh, China,
Yeah.
China. They've already, they came into Myanmar they were the first ones there, and Russia.
Yeah.
They're gonna fill the vacuum. They're gonna fill the vacuum. Hi.
Hi, Serena Sanders. You talk about other organizations or other people filling the vacuum, but, I think about missionary mentality and how can some of these efforts, are they really driven from a positive, uplifting the community versus a monetizing or mission-based religious, building? I think some of these things can be very harmful. What's your perspective on?
Yeah, we worked a lot with, like Catholic Relief Services and, the religious, I can't remember, I think it was under Bush, we had began a religious initiative, where we had to work with religious NGOs. But, it was pretty mild in terms of the religious aspect, it was just doing good. That's my experience. But let's,
Oh, please,
yeah, sure. If there's no questions, I'll call on you, okay? Hi.
Hi, I'm Gary Wilkinson. I'm a lecturer here in the business department, but I'm sorry. So I feel stronger in your classroom that I represent the university. Obviously, some of my students are actually there, so listen,
Hi.
questions from them. They're fantastic. How can I inspire in a very non-political way, in a very even-handed way, non-ideological way, inspire students during these times? Is that question worthy of a business?
Inspire, I'm sorry, Matt.
I want to inspire students. I want to give them hope. I want to.
Oh.
That's why I'm here tonight. But I have to do it in a non.
Just in general?
In general.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm
One
not the
sentence
one.
of inspiration. They're so magnificent.
Thank you. We gotta vote. We gotta vote. And we have, what we do up in Mendocino, every day we call one of our Congress people or we call our senator, because they're data points. And I think some of these Republicans are gonna cave. I really do, I hope so. Because they're getting a lot of pushback and revulsion from their constituents. But I think protesting, I worry about our international students protesting. I have to say that I have the local FSN for my mission in Libya. she's in DC with a green card, and she's posted things on Instagram that I know she could. We have free speech in this country, but she's not safe. And I say you've got to do something every day. You've got to call your congressman, write a postcard, whatever, but do something every day. It takes 5 minutes. Phone calls, less. Usually, you get like an answering machine, but those are data points for them. Just leave a message. Be angry.
I will follow up with an anecdote. A couple Sunday mornings ago, I got a letter from Jeff Bezos, well, actually Amazon. I published some books 7 or 8 years ago, and they said, your account is suspended. Why? Well, it's a certain book. I won't tell you the title that I wrote 7 years ago. But they said, there's questions about this book, there's questions about the sources. So until you respond, for suspending your account. And I did respond after my shock an hour later saying this was my material. And they responded back, you're now back in your graces, but we suggest you take a look at these books they've written. I'm not trying to say So that was just an anecdote.
That's
I've been
scary.
shocked.
That's scary.
Yeah, no, we have to fight back. I mean, we have to stand together, because they'll pick individuals off, or individual universities, or individual law firms, or, but we've got to stand together. And I went to, I think there were protests across the nation on April 10th. I went to one, but I mean, there's no message. The Democrats have got no message. The old ones have to retire. Right? Right, Joe?
Some of them are friends of mine. I do this on the side.
But you have young friends too.
Yes.
All right. Hi.
Hi, my name is Tanya. Thank you very much for all the insights and experience that you have shared. So I'm just curious after, hearing about the different positions that you've worked at within your organization and the countries that you've been at. Could you share a bit maybe on some challenges or bottlenecks or areas of improvement that you could see within USAID looking back?
Oh, like in terms of reforms?
Yeah, or things that, at that time you saw that were like a barrier maybe to get on with the goals and the different objectives.
So I can say one thing. Yeah, okay. In our conflict zones, in Afghanistan or Pakistan or Iraq, we have 1-year assignments with 2 R&Rs and on leave. I mean, people can't get anything done. And they're just bodies there. And to me, that was waste. You try to call somebody to get something done, they're on R&R. Or, and then, yeah, no, that to me was a huge problem. Huge. And, we talked about it. People knew that, but the problem is nobody ever does anything. And the thing is, the administrator's political. It doesn't want to get involved in the management. And then the deputy is involved in all the it's really hard because the whole top of USAID is political and everybody else's career pretty much. And, they don't really talk to each other or they don't trust each other. And so it's very difficult. Hi.
Hi, I'm Larry Martinez. What are some of the mechanisms for coordination between USAID and, for instance, UN agencies and development agencies from other countries?
Yeah, that's a good question. That depends on the country. When I was in West Bank and Gaza, my last assignment, they had a biannual coordinating meeting in Brussels or New York at the, next with UNGA. So it was all of the partners, well, the donors, and it was bigwigs from like Jason Greenblatt and Jared Kushner, mission director, other donors, Israelis and Palestinians. So it's every 6 months. But like anything, you share programs there, and then when you get back, things, you don't follow up.
But is there's not an institutionalized, let's say, a mechanism that has an institutional framework to it for the coordination of various, let's say, industrialization or education or health?
Sure there is. Yeah, in country there is. There's donor working groups.
Yeah.
Like for example, I'm just thinking of, let's say Russia, there was an HIV/AIDS working group with all the different donors. Yeah, there are, yeah, and they usually run, we ran a lot of them. Morocco. Morocco had different working groups for each sector, and then we had one big one, like once a year. And then we also had a partners meeting, which is different, with our chiefs of party from our different implementing partners. This partners meeting that everybody presented what they were doing. We would question them about their strategic planning. Yeah, so, yeah, there are definitely systems in place for that.
I think we have time for just one more question.
Oh my God, it's
I know.
and I'm here, right, for a few minutes.
Yes, and then you can absolutely chat with Monica afterwards. Should we go, Bill? Yeah.
This group is obviously academia.
What?
This group is obviously academia predominantly, right?
I don't know.
How can we get you in front of the lay public? This is the wrong group for you to talk to. There's a whole
No,
lot of
and
people.
I'm available, I'm retired.
There's a whole lot of people who need to hear what you have to say.
I'm happy to say it. And you know what, I have to thank Joe and Dino for giving me the courage to speak out. Because I have to tell you, this morning, my tone about the Trump in particular was a lot lower. Thank you. Yeah, I'm available.
Okay, we'll take Trey. Do you have one last question for us? Yeah.
Yeah, when you were talking about your time teaching at War College, you
Yeah.
mentioned 3 colors of.
What?
When you were teaching at the War College, I think you mentioned 3 colors of, I think you said.
3 courses?
Three.
Well, it's 3 pillars. Yeah, there's only 2 now.
I wrote down diplomacy, development, of defense.
Defense.
And it made me think on your, what kind of risk sometimes are we putting on the groups and people that we sometimes interact with?
Well, you saw, I mean, our partners were assassinated in Moscow.
You think it was partially attributable to the.
There's no doubt. I mean, we supported the corrective programs that Andrei Kozlov was implementing. And then, you know, yeah, there's no doubt. And then we supported Anna Politskaya, USAID, for investigative reporting. I mean, no doubt.
Were they labeled as spies?
What?
Were they labeled as spies by the Russian government?
I don't know, I don't think they were spies, but they didn't like, they said we were meddling in their politics. And then with Mikhail Khodorkovsky, he could not be assassinated because he was so high level, and he was the head of Yukos Oil Company. And so, but 10 years in a gulag, that would dampen my presidential aspirations.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes,